Everyone, thank you all for joining. Welcome to day 2 of Honey Native and Beyond's Careers in Environmental Science webinar. Through these webinars, we're hoping to be able to educate and inform as many people as we can about the environment and careers within the environmental science field. And so on that note, we will now introduce Ms. Terry Rogaway, our speaker for today.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, so Ms. Terry Rogaway, she is an educational program coordinator at Open Space Authority, and she was a former faculty member of the West Valleys College Park Management Program, and she is currently teaching interpretation as SJSU. And one of her passion is to create a better experience, nature experience for disabled people. And some of her speaking points that she will be going over is careers in the park system and environmental education, as well as her career path and experience, and also Open Space Authority and the benefits of partnering with other agencies. So without further ado, let's give it up to Ms. Terry Rogaway.
Thank you. So should I share my screen for my PowerPoint or? Okay.
Yes.
I'm like so nervous. Oh my goodness. So I really like working for Open Space, and one of the things that I always wondered about was, how do you decide to get to the career that you're going into, right? Like, how do you decide? And I found out that when my mom was a kid, that they actually had tests they would take that would like tell them what kind of careers they should go into and things like that. But I never got to take a test like that, so I was like, how am I going to know? And so originally, I totally dated myself with this, but I actually wanted to be an astronaut. I said, oh man, I want to work in space. This would be so cool. I really want to go up into space. And I had these visions of being out in the stars and flying around in a ship. And I thought that by the time I was old, that this would be, everybody would be doing this. So I got really excited about it. And then what ended up happening was, now I work for Open Space. So this is the team that I work with now, and I tease people and I joke around with them, and I'm like, be careful what you ask for, because I said I want to work in space, and now I work for Open Space. But that's okay, because I really love nature. And so this is the team that I work with now, and it has probably 5 more people, and there are a whole bunch of different careers working out in nature and in space, like open spaces and things like this. So I don't want you to think that there's just like park rangers or things like that, because there's so many different jobs and a lot of different personalities and things like that too. So our mission over at the Open Space Authority, this is our mission. Like if you want, you can like check it out. What I think is unusual about us is that we also include the preservation of agriculture in what we do. So we have a planning department that will look into like properties before we buy them. And they do everything. They go out there and they check every plant and animal that they can find. They look for archaeological sites on the properties. They look at the water and how the water moves. And then they bring people like me in, and what I do is I look at the property and I see what kind of things could we teach about. And there are things called interpretive themes, where it's kind of like a party theme, like, oh, I want to do the Hawaii or, luau theme or something like that, but it's kind of like a deeper meaning. So like a theme would be, this land is here because we're here to protect it. All of this land is really important for wildlife, and this is why, and we need your help, like ideas like that. So people were asking me about, what's the deal with agriculture? And the idea is that, if you look at this picture, wildlife can walk across that. They could come down from up here, then the foreground is actually Coyote Ridge, and they can go down, and they can go down the hill from the Diablo Foothills Range that we're in over on our side, and it's the same side of the valley that you guys are on, like over in the East Bay. and they can actually walk across to the Santa Cruz Mountains if we provide a pathway for them. So if you think about that, what goes into all of that, for all those different, how does that happen? So that wildlife can do that. And so one of the ways it happens is that we always buy land that's up against other open land so that the animals can walk across if they need to, and they can run across a farmer's field and they'll be fine. So that's part of what we were trying to do. I get excited and I talk fast, so let me know if you need me to slow down or anything. Playing with all the different controls here. How did I get here? So how did I get here? I love owls, by the way. They're so fun and they have a really short attention span. So you think they're like wise, but they're really like, what's that? What's that? What's that? And that kind of stuff. And then, so I got here, because I actually found out about this program, and I was really worried because I thought, I had a brother-in-law who he went to Penn State University to be a history teacher, and he was so sure he wanted to do that. And then after he went to work, he found out he hated it. And I'm like, oh no, I'm already married. What if I take my husband all the way up to Humboldt University to learn how to be a park ranger? And then I find out I hate it. I'd feel so bad for moving us. So I thought, oh no. And so then I found out that there was actually a program right here in the Bay Area that you could go to. And so it's park management, and it's a junior college. And so it's over there in Saratoga, and everybody's really nice. And park management is actually a great way to learn all the different aspects of working in parks. So, but the other thing that was interesting to me was that I was raised in a traditional Mexican-American household, and my dad was always kind of scowling at me for wanting to play with tools or learn how to use the hedge trimmers or stuff like that. He's like, go inside and clean the house. I'm like, ew. So I had these traditional roles. My mom she's Swedish, and my dad is Mexican American. So I've got really light skin, and then, that kind of stuff. And I kept trying to, not do these traditional roles. And he would be like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, because it's fun. I want to be self-sufficient and learn how to fix things. And he's like, that's what your husband's for. And I'm like, what? So all these kinds of roles, right? So in park management, they teach you everything. We learned how to install a toilet. I'm like, what? When am I going to do that? But I learned how to install toilets. I learned how to use chainsaws. I learned how to use every tool and how to fix things. And then also you hear these stories on the news about, people that go off to go into the skiing into the snow, and their car goes off the road and they get hurt or they get lost out in the woods. And it's like, what would happen if that happened to me and my family, right? I wouldn't know what to do. Well, if you go in this program, they actually teach you. So they actually took us snow camping. This is a real thing, digging a hole in the ground and actually sleeping in it. And it's like snow survival. And you find out everything that you can do to stay warm. And it's like, you guys know the freezing temperature of water? It's 32 degrees, right? So I camped places in this program where it was 5 degrees outside. And if you have a tent, it's only 5 degrees warmer than it is outside. But if you make a snow cave, like in this picture, it's at least 32 degrees, much toastier. So part of this training is not so much academic in terms of PhDs and things like that, but it's really a lot of life skills and a lot of survival skills and things like that. And the other thing is you see this guy that's climbing over here. They teach you how to do all of the knots and how to do climbing. So if somebody falls off a cliff, you can go rescue them. So they teach you all of that kind of stuff too. And then over here's the picture of the fire. So these yellow suits that you see the firefighters wearing on the news and stuff, that's made out of Nomex. Nomex doesn't burst into flame. It's really cool. It kind of smolders. And if you watch somebody and they're standing in a fire like this guy is, his pant leg will slowly disappear because it'll kind of smolder if he doesn't put put water on himself. But what'll happen is it won't burst into flames. So it gives them a much better chance to get closer to the fire in order to put the fires out. So part of working in parks and doing that training is learning wildland firefighting. And my dad was really big on us going to college. So I did actually get, in the course of my career, I've actually gotten like 5 different college degrees. And so my master's is actually in park interpretation for special needs. But I started out in junior colleges and checking those out because I didn't want to spend a lot of money on things that, what if I don't like it? Or what if I go over there and I'm not good at it and I need to change careers? So in junior college, you can do that because you can jump around like to different career paths and it's not very expensive. So that was part of what I was doing. And if I had actually known about wildland firefighting and what that's like, when I was in high school, I totally would have done that for a profession. And it turns out, just so you know, that there are crews of women and there are crews of men. So my first boss at Open Space was actually a wildland firefighter. And he said, you send the crew of men in first, they have these special tools, they whack the fire down really hard, and then they keep going. They're like really fast. It's all muscle and really fast, brute force. And then you have the women teams come in, and they're the ones that find everything the guys missed because they're in a hurry to get the fire out. So the women's teams go in and they make sure the fire doesn't come back up. They do the detail work, totally crucial work. And then the other thing that happens is that sometimes women can have a higher pain tolerance. And it's because of childbirth and things like that. You know, we have this, our brains are a little bit wired a little bit different. And so women could handle the smoke in their face and they could handle the heat a little bit better than the men, but they couldn't necessarily, it's really hard to carry the hose full of water. It's like when you pick it up, you put it on your shoulder. I've actually done this. It's like a rock. You're like, oh, why is it so heavy? Well, water's actually really heavy. And if the hose touches the ground where this guy's feet are, it'll actually burn a hole in it and then you won't have any water. So you have to like hold the hose up on everybody's shoulders and then pull and pull. And you have to get a bunch of guys and gals to get together and actually pull the line. And you have to spray the ground underneath it and everything. And I remember like in one of the wildland firefighting trainings that they actually lit this grassland on fire and we went in there and put it out. And I was like, whoa, this is heat unlike any heat I've ever felt before. I mean, I've like roasted marshmallows. You know, I've tried to cook things, which is a little scarier for me than roasting marshmallows. And it's like, I never understood like how intense that heat is. And somebody's telling you, go put it out. And your natural instinct is to go, ah, and like to run away from danger. But you're like, if I don't put this out, somebody's going to get hurt. So then you get the hoses and they have this weird thing. So you're like, whoa, and all this water comes out and it almost like knocks you over. It's like so strong. And it takes like at least 2 people to hold the hose steady while you like spray the water on everything that's on fire. So it's really trippy. And then you can't hear anything because you have the helmet on and you have all of this stuff covering your face and you can't hear anything. So they have to tap you when they're like, let's go, they have to tap you. So this is all stuff that you learn about in these programs, right? And I'm like, whoa. And I remember this one moment when I was standing there and everything was done and we were just waiting to see if we could see any more fire, and the breeze blew. And when it blew, all of this ash like lifted up off of like the sticks that was left from plants and stuff, and it went, and it totally looked like snow. And I was like, that's weird. So does anybody have any questions about park management and what that kind of training is like?
Yeah, I have a question. I actually read this article by, I think, ProPublica, and it said that, one of the big problems with wildfire management is that we aren't actually burning enough and we aren't letting like these smaller fires burn out. So then it becomes like a huge, big fire. Can you like comment on that? Like, what's your experience?
They're actually right. They're right. So I feel guilty because I grew up loving Smokey the Bear. And I love the idea. And the idea was really originally to stop children from playing with matches and causing fires and getting themselves hurt. But it turned it into this whole campaign to stop wildfires in general. But in the state of California, especially where we live, this is a chaparral habitat. It is healthiest when it burns every 20 years at the least. Like each section is, it evolves, it grows, all of the plants are kind of scratchy and waxy, and then you have grasses. And so it needs, and you have all those oak trees, right? And the oak trees have acorns. And if you don't burn the grass under the oak trees, then the bugs will get in the acorns. And in the old days, the Native Americans used to eat the acorns, so you don't want bugs. So if you stop nature from doing what it needs to do, you create a problem without realizing that you are. And so it's my opinion that we have caused a lot of these devastating fires by not allowing fires to burn when they need to. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to set a fire on purpose, which some of my bosses have been people, that's what they do, right? So if you're going to do that, you have to prepare the land. So you have to know, and you have to work with people that know what's it supposed to look like. Well, one of the jobs that I did in park management in my internship was I went to a small little park and I removed all, they call them ladder fuels because the fire will climb up the ladder and set the canopy on fire. So if the leaves on the top of the tree catch fire, the tree will die. But if the fire goes along the ground and just burns around the tree and keeps going, then the tree won't die. It gets a little charred, but it won't die. So I had a chainsaw and a team of people, and I went into this park and we weed whacked everything. So we got the grass down really low. And then we went and we looked, and anywhere that there was a branch that was like touching the ground or a dead tree that was had stuff close to it, we would cut all that down with a chainsaw and drop it down onto the ground. And then if there was too much of it, we were actually turning it into wood chips and using it to suppress the weeds from growing up. And so that way, if that part caught fire, the grass would burn, but the trees wouldn't die. And so we got really lucky actually with Big Basin Park. A lot of us park people were really sad when we heard that that park burned. It's one of the iconic parks, you know, for this area. But the good news is that the redwoods didn't die. So the old growth redwoods, their bark is really resistant to fire. And so as long as the inside of the tree, even the inside of the tree can burn, and as long as the outer edge of the tree is still okay, that tree can keep living. That's how they made the one that you could like drive through in different parks, is it burned as part of a fire. And so they just scraped it out and you can actually drive through it. So, but we don't have that many redwood trees over here. We have oak trees and we have a lot of grass. And the grass, like totally, you know, that's part of what you learn about is which of these things are actually weeds and which are not. And knowing the history like I do is helpful because I mean, otherwise you wouldn't know that when the Spanish expeditions came across and they conquered California and they started settling California, they brought all of their livestock with them. And all of their livestock were eating grasses and things from Spain and from Mexico. So they're walking through California with all of these animals. And California used to be green all year because we had perennial grasses that didn't die. They didn't have golden hills like we're used to, like this. This is evidence that the Spanish came and brought cows that were eating weeds, things we consider to be weeds. These are all annuals. And that's why they turn golden, because they die. And then they kind of like build up on the ground. And so if you don't have animals to eat and they actually like eating the brown stuff, I'm like, oh, that surprised me. I thought they wouldn't like dry grass, but it's actually the tastiest for them. So if you have cows come and sheep come and they eat the grass down, they'll actually help it so that when the fire comes through, it burns really fast. It's considered a cool fire because it goes fast and it doesn't linger anywhere too long. If fire lasts too long in one spot, it'll sterilize the soil. And then if you want to grow anything there again, you have to come in and fix the soil. So in some of these places where it's really hot, they're going to have to do that to get anything to grow again. Sorry, that was kind of long-winded.
So in park management, do you have any ideas about how it can be improved?
Like the park management program, or you mean like taking care of the land?
Like taking care of it?
I think that we are really dependent on people from your generation. One of the best things I think that's out there that can happen is to continually have people that are interested in nature, interested in watching and seeing how nature reacts to things and learning from nature, watching what works for nature, and then coming up and working in these agencies and telling us, hey, I don't think we should do that. I was studying this nature stuff over here, and I realized that if we do that, it won't flood. Because a lot of times what people try to do is we try to fix it with technology. Like, we're going to build these great big walls to try to make all the water go that way. And what happens? The water goes under the wall and it falls over. And then we're like, why? It was so expensive to do that. But I think if we have people that are young and innovative like yourselves, and you come into this profession and you're curious and you're observant, I think that you'll be able to help us make better decisions about how we do things in the future. So I think we're about to see a shift back. My personal preference is that we shift back to paying attention to how Mother Nature does things, and that we learn from that and what's successful in that. Because if you think about things like Hurricane Katrina and all these hurricanes and things that happen, all of those areas like around New Orleans and stuff, those were all wetlands before people moved in. And a wetland can withstand an enormous storm and not be destroyed. But people came in and we filled it in with dirt and we put houses there. And then part of what happened is when the storms come, they don't have that big natural buffer that can stop it. And so you end up having all of these homes destroyed and people get hurt and things like that. So if we can find a way to listen to what nature does, I think that we can be more successful at dealing with some of these really crazy environmental disasters that are starting to happen now.
Also, in wildfires, don't the amount of like natural resources increase?
They do. It's actually what it does when a fire is allowed to burn as it needs to. So it burns frequently, like every other year, there's a little fire type thing. That land will be the healthiest, because what it does is it takes all of the junk that build up on top of the soil, all of the dead plants and things like that, and it burns it and it turns it into kind of like fertilizer. So all of those nutrients, then when it rains, all those nutrients go down into the soil and you get really rich habitat and really healthy plants. And then all the plants that come up are like really green and really flexible, and they do a really good job of photosynthesis. So they create more oxygen than they would if they got old and woody. And so the problem we have right now is a lot of our plants were allowed to grow too long, and they've gotten old and woody and they don't have that much green on them anymore. And the wood parts will burn, and then it might accidentally kill the plant because it'll burn too hot. Whereas we can do it without fire if we go in there and cut it down like once a year, just cut it. And that's what the Native Americans did, is they'd make fires every year. And then the grass would come back better with more seeds that they could eat and things like that. Did that work?
Yes, but I have another question. So my last question is, how would you describe the nitrogen cycle in national parks, and what is the purpose of national?
Oh, the purpose of the national parks? So that's really interesting. I think national parks, it's protected by the federal government, and they have a whole department that's in charge of those. And so what I find interesting as a park professional is that they have some of the most beautiful and amazing things. It's a way for our government to protect properties that they consider to be heritage type properties. Like, we're not going to find this anywhere else in the world, you know. So that's good in that sense to have it. The hard part is that the more prestigious the park is, like, you can't get more prestigious than working for like Yosemite National Park or Yellowstone National Park or Rocky Mountain National Park. Those are like places that will take your breath away when you go see them. And being able to work in them is really an honor, but they pay you like $7 an hour. So I can work at the city and get paid, you know. When I worked for the city of San Jose, for example, I was getting paid, this is a long time ago, but I was getting paid like $16 an hour to be the kid in the ticket booth that asked people for their money to give them their ticket so they could park. I'm like, that's really cool. But when I worked for state parks, I was running the park and I was getting paid $8 an hour. So it's kind of weird. Why would you do that, right? And so national parks actually pays the least. When you go work there, they're like the lowest there, but it's the most prestigious. And so I'm like, it must be the federal minimum wage instead of the local minimum wage. I'm not sure. But for the nitrogen cycle, I think, I'm not sure about national parks, but for us here in the Bay Area, one of the best plants for helping us with the nitrogen cycle is actually lupin. I love lupin. It's so pretty. I should have put a picture here for you. So lupin will grab nitrogen that's fixed in the soil and it can't get into the roots of the plants. So lupin bushes and shrubs will grow down and they'll somehow soak that into their roots, and they make these little nodules of fertilizer, this nitrogen, and they fix nitrogen so that it gets stuck in their body like that. And then what happens is, then if you have farmlands, you grow lupin on purpose so that it'll grab the fertilizer that the plants can't get otherwise. And then you go over it before it can go to seed. You run over it with like a tractor and chop it up, and instant fertilizer, like in the ground. So so that's one of the ways that we can grab nitrogen that way. And then the other thing is, we're working on studying nitrogen fixation in open spaces. That's part of the reason that we want to keep these lands protected, is because the healthier it is, the greener it is, the more vegetation there is, it does a better job of sucking up the excess nitrogen, like out of the atmosphere and out of the ground, and putting it into a form that we can actually use it, if I understand that right.
And my last question is it possible for this lupine plant to grow without pollination, because like bees are the main part of this event?
So if you absolutely had to, I've been thinking about Mars a lot because of the crazy sky today. Looks like Mars. If you needed to, you could grow lupin without pollinators, but it would be extremely work intensive. So you would have to have people with they actually do this in like research in college. You get like a little paintbrush and you go in there and you have to like brush every single flower, and then brush the flower next to it and brush the flower, and like, oh my gosh, it takes forever. Whereas a bee would do that naturally all day and be much more successful at it. But you could make people do that and it would just take forever, but it would keep the species alive until you can help the bees recover enough to be able to do it in order to help us that way. Is that what you were thinking of?
Yeah.
I'm so glad we have bees. Was there another question out there about park management? I didn't know.
Yeah, I have a question. My question was about wildfires. So you talked about controlled burns. So do you think we should like perform more controlled burns, or do you think we should just wait for the wildfire to happen, and then like when that happens, we'll just control the spread?
I think it's a lot safer if we do it on purpose as a plan. Because what'll happen is so that's interesting how the money works too. Money is a big thing, like with politics. And so what'll happen is somebody like a public agency, like Open Space, for example, could decide that we're going to do a control burn. So what we do is we figure out which area we're going to burn, and we go all around the perimeter and we put use bulldozers. It's kind of like really harsh, but you use bulldozers and you scrape it down to the mineral soil so there's no vegetation at all, or you cut it really, really, really short like that. And sometimes if they have a lot of time, they'll even make a little track and put goats in there, let the goats eat it. So that's more organic. But if you know you're going to do it, you can prepare for it and you can have emergency contingencies in case it gets out of control. If you don't know what's going to happen, then you're kind of like, oh my goodness, now I have to hurry and try to get everything and move my valuables and call my aunt. And, like this kind of stuff happens. Like, because we had some scary stuff here. Like the boundary for this SCU complex fire was only 2 miles from my house. And that was the evacuation boundary. So I was still outside the evacuation zone, but for the first time in my life, I actually had to think, what would I take out of my house if I had to evacuate? And I found out right away, I was quite pleased with myself that I cared more about my spouse and my pets than my things. So you're like, you're going to walk away from all your things. They're going to be gone type stuff. But if you know that you're going to do it, you can prepare the land and you can make it safer. It's never 100% safe, but you can make it safer. And then you can use it as a training opportunity and bring all these other agencies in, and they can get practice in a setting where it's a lot safer. And that way, when it happens for real, where it's an out of control fire, they have a better chance that they won't lose their lives. Have you guys seen those things that it looks like you're a baked potato when you have to wear it? Have you seen those special shelters they have? That stuff's crazy. They actually made us do that in park management, where we were actually cutting fire line and we had the emergency shelter like on our waistband, and we're cutting, and then all of a sudden the teacher comes running out of nowhere, scared us half to death. He's like, go, 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 here comes a fire. And we're all, ah. And we ran, and then we're like, deploy, deploy. And I'm like, deploy what? And they're like, your shelter. I'm like, oh my gosh. So you're like running, and then you're grabbing this thing and you're trying to shake it, and it's like a map. It unfolds like crazy tinfoil map, and you're shaking it, and then you have to fall down on the ground and push all the soil away so that you have a little hole to put your face in that's lower. And then you have to put that crazy shelter on, and it's made out of like tinfoil. And then you have to have gloves on and your boots, because what'll happen is when the fire does come for real, it'll burn right up to that metal and it'll burn your skin. So you have to have your gloves on and have your shirts, rolled down and all this kind of stuff. And you're holding on to it really tight like this, and you're holding on. And then the teachers run up there and they start trying to pull the stuff off of you. And if it comes off, you're like dead. And so you're like, you're the person that has to clean all the tools because you, unquote, died. So what happens is when the fire comes up the hill, right in front of the fire is this enormous windstorm that happens. So we're not used to that. So we don't know that happens. So they have to train you to be ready for that. So you have to really hold on to your shelter so it doesn't blow away. Because if it lifts off of you, then you'll die. And there's actually people who have survived by the fire going over the top of them in their little potato suits. They look like baked potatoes. And they just get kind of like second degree burns and stuff like that, because it gets really hot. But that's part of why you have your face down in a little hole you made like that, so that your mouth and your lungs are breathing slightly cooler air than what's up in the tent with you type thing. But it's crazy. But yeah, so if you know what's coming, you can be better prepared and better trained. What happens with the money is that when you do a control burn, the agency has to pay for it. They have to pay for all of the time and the resources and the trucks and things like that. If it gets out of control and it jumps your fire line and it takes off, now it becomes a federal thing or a state thing. So it's no longer your agency that has to pay for it, because now it's an emergency. And the state government will come in, or the federal government will come in, and they actually pay for everybody's salaries and things like that. So it's kind of like, oh man. So you have to be sure that the people that are applying, they have to get an application to do a control burn, and they have to have a whole plan and everything. And then also the powers that be have to believe that you're not going to let it break loose because you don't have the money to pay for doing it. So they want to make sure that you don't cheat. like in that regard. And so, but now it's like, look at all these crazy fires. This is because things got too big and too dry, you know, and then not having enough moisture and stuff like that. So it's
So you talked about the agency Open Space. Is that like an NGO or a government entity?
so it actually is a government, it's a special district. So we are the same as kind of like a school district has the same kind of jurisdiction, or the water district. And so we're technically government. We are nonprofit, but we are government. And we have money that comes in through taxes, like property taxes, and through a special assessment too. And I was like, what's a special assessment? That's a weird thing to say. Well, a special assessment is when you say like for example, Gilroy, the city of Gilroy had a special assessment. And they said, if you give us $1 a month, we'll put in 200 light poles so you can like see where you're going in the dark. And so at the end of the year, you can count the light poles and see if they did what they said for your dollars, right? Well, with open space, our special assessment says that if you support open space, we will increase your property value. I'm like, how do you prove that? Right? What if I live in a little tiny 500-foot apartment in the middle of downtown San Jose with no windows, and I can't even see out to see open space in the hills? How does that benefit me or make my property better? So the idea is that by having access to these places, we don't charge for these places. We don't charge for parking. We don't charge for coming to events. We don't charge for any of our educational programs, because as far as we're concerned, you already paid. So, and we don't even charge people that live outside the jurisdiction to come here, because we want people to experience open space and see how wonderful it can be when you're preservationist. So like there's conservation and preservation, and conservationist is taking care of land, but the primary idea is that you're going to use it somehow, like for recreation or hunting or resources, but you're going to take care of it, right? Preservation is like the resource comes first, and that's what we are. So we're a special district government agency that's focused on land management and land preservation, so that the resources can be protected. And then what I do is the education part. So it's like, I want people to find out how amazing this is because they paid for it. You paid for it. Let me show you the cool stuff you have, and how you can come experience this stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes. So how big exactly is your jurisdiction?
So our jurisdiction is San Jose, Santa Clara, Morgan Hill, Milpitas, and Campbell, and then all of the unincorporated areas in between. So we have about maybe 35,000 acres that we manage. It's actual land that we manage now. But that's our jurisdiction line. And then the funny thing is that Gilroy didn't buy in. So we were created in 1994, and Gilroy said, no, I don't want to pay, you know, $12 a year for open space. We don't need it. We have lots of open space here. So they basically, well, that's my impersonation of what they said. I don't know that's what they said. But they didn't want to buy in, so they said no. So it's kind of funny. So when you see our jurisdictional map, there's like a hole. And the hole is Gilroy. Maybe someday they'll decide they like us and they'll want to join too, but we'll have to see like what they do. But yes, so we also recently had a new, we got permission to buy land outside of our jurisdiction if there's a river or a waterway that goes right along the border. And the idea is that if we're protecting this water and keeping it safe by keeping the land really healthy and clean, but somebody has a farm or something on the other side of the same river and they're using pesticides and fertilizer and stuff like that, they're going to pollute the water. So if we're trying to protect that water, we now have permission to buy the land on the other side if we can. And then that way we can keep the water really clean that way. These pictures here are from Alum Rock Park. My second part of so right out of park management, I went right into being a park ranger. So it was actually, I used to be law enforcement, and I had a badge and I didn't have a gun, but I actually didn't need it. So I see a lot of these things going on the news and stuff like that. And I'm like, why did that happen? You don't need a gun to do law enforcement all the time. And so that's my personal opinion. And that's because I went to the police academy and learned how things work and how, what the rules are and all of this. And then we used to freak those guys out in the police academy because they would do a practice thing, like a police thing. And we would be practicing these scenarios. And then we would say, okay, now how do I do it if I don't have a gun? Because San Jose park rangers don't have guns. And they would say, well, why would you want to do that? You guys are crazy. I'm like, because with the power of our mind, we can talk to people and help them understand why they're supposed to do something. And so I don't need a gun. Like I had handcuffs and I had pepper spray and I could arrest people, but I would basically sit them down like on a bench or something. And then the police would come at that point and take them to jail. But I would do all of the contact before that. And I think in my entire career as a park ranger, I only wrote 8 tickets. And the last one was to a police officer from the city of Palo Alto. He did something against the rules and he was really rude and he was dangerous about it. And I didn't like that. And I'm like, don't hurt my park visitors. You could have hurt somebody by driving in the inside of the park. So I actually wrote him a ticket. And what I did was I wrote the ticket to his car, not to him. Because if it was to him, he could argue. If it's to his car, it's a car violation. And so he couldn't argue that one. So I'm like, it's only fair that you have to obey the rules just like everybody else. But I went straight from park management to working as a park ranger at Alum Rock Park. And this place is cool. And it has lots of wildlife and historical things and stuff like that. And so, you know, there's a lot of different ways that you can go along this path to do this career. And this is what I did. And so if you look at the guy on the right-hand side over here, you can see the park management patch. That's actually my teacher. And so I went and got him after I became a park ranger. So I'm on the left-hand side here with the green shirt, and we're doing a practice because at Alum Rock Park, when you go into the parking lot and you look up, you see this hill with this big rock, and there's like these big antennas up there. And every now and then people go up there and they stand on the top of it and they're like, don't do that, it's dangerous, but they fall off. So if they fall off, you have to, most of the time they don't die, but you have to go get them. And the thing is, like, part of being a park ranger is that even if they do die, you still have to go get them. So a lot of times you have to stay really calm and collected. And you could have things that are like wildfires, or you're dealing with first aid, or you're dealing with police type things, or somebody's kid got hurt or lost and they're really scared. And so the whole time your face has to stay really calm and don't react to anything that you hear or see. Because if you go, oh my gosh, that's disgusting, because they have a tick on their face or something like that, or they got a wound, they're scared. And so you have to learn, you have to train and learn not to react to the things that you see so that you don't frighten them or make them more worried than they need to be. So that's another part of the profession, is staying calm when other people freak out. And then how do you help them calm down so that you can deal with the situation? So this guy's going over the edge of this cliff, and I'm the person that's holding the belay line. So the person who's on belay like that is I'm going to catch him if he falls. So you can see 2 ropes going to him. One of those ropes is his climbing line, and the other one is his belay line, which is his safety line. And so my teacher's there as a backup, even though he knows that I'm really good at that. I'm not going to let this guy fall. He's there as an extra backup for the training to make sure if something happens to me, like what if I passed out or something right at the second this guy fell? The teacher's there to make sure that he's the second guy that can pull on the line and stop this guy from falling. So like, whoa. But yes, so the relationships that you make as you go into your park profession, a lot of these people, you're going to be seeing them in the future. So like if you guys come to open space, you might see, like, here's me after I went to open space with my uniform that I got to create because I was like the first person in my job there. And then these are the park rangers that I used to work with, and that's the same kind of badge that I had. So this is a gal that was my field training officer when I was at Guadalupe River Park in downtown San Jose. And then this is Ranger Penny, who takes pictures of everything, and she's the reason I have all these pictures. So, but this is me after I went to open space, and you keep the partnerships that you have with people, because those, you never know when you're going to meet those people again and be able to team up and do programs together or help the community together. And if you're passionate about bees, knowing people in other park agencies and getting them to make good decisions for bees is a good thing to do, right? Is a good people resource to have. How are we doing on time? Oh, almost up. This is the next thing that I did was I actually went to the California State Park System and I became a park interpreter. And people would say, oh, wow, what language do you speak? And I would say nature, culture, and history. So, so all of these people are people that like to do education. And some of them are law enforcement, like this guy, he's a law enforcement ranger, but they also have to do campfires and they have to do education. And so state parks, their entire approach to people is that no matter who you are, you all have the same shirt. So you could be a park interpreter and have the same shirt as this park ranger. So that when people come up to you, they have good feelings about the whole agency because of the people that talk to them and the good experiences that they have. So state parks has some amazing locations, and I used to do campfires and junior rangers all up and down the Santa Cruz coast. And park interpreters are like really fun people. And then for you guys, if you want, so once COVID clears up, if you're interested in finding out what this kind of park education stuff is like, you should go to the Youth Science Institute. So they have a facility at Alum Rock Park, and they have one at Vasona Lake. And they used to have one at Sanborn County Park, but I don't know if they still do. And so I actually learned how to hold birds like this. And I got to hold, this was Luna, so I got to learn how to hold birds of prey, learn all about their lives and the things that they need. And then I would actually go to schools and teach children about these animals. So they had all different kinds of birds and hawks and snakes and chinchillas. That was fun. Did you know that chinchillas fear shed? That really soft hair, and if something gets a hold of them and they freak out, the hair falls out. So like if you startle them, they'll go choo and take off, and then there's like this little cloud of hairs coming down, so you're like so I'm like, oh my goodness. But I loved teaching people about the animals and getting to work with them and hold them and take care of them and things like that. And so you can learn all the programs that they do. They do ones about history, geology, all this kind of stuff. And they teach you how to break it down so that you can explain it to people and it doesn't sound like too hard for people to understand, because it's really important for people to understand the concepts behind things and to be spoken to in a way that is respectful, but allows them to understand what you're talking about too. I got this one guy at work and he's like, blah, 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 blah. Half the time, I don't know what he said. And I'm like, you're very scientific, but I don't know what you said. So I wanted to show you something about how life can happen. So I was working for the Youth Science Institute and I was having a lot of fun with the animals. And then one day, dun, 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 at the Youth Science Institute, they had a really old rattlesnake. You're not supposed to touch the rattlesnake, but this rattlesnake was 30 years old. And so the gal that worked there was going to teach me how to handle the rattlesnake in case she ever left the job. There would be a person number 2 who could actually grab the snake in case we need to have a vet visit or, you know, do something where we have to get a hold of the snake to like take him out of the exhibit and all this kind of stuff. So what happened to me was I was really excited to like learn how to hold this rattlesnake. I thought it was going to be so cool. And I came home and I was all excited and I'm like, woo, hey, Ray, my husband, right? Hey, Ray, guess what? I'm going to get to hold the rattlesnake. DJ's going to teach me how to hold these dangerous snakes and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, and that's when he like jumped at me with this piece of paper and he goes, here's an application, fill this out. And I'm like, what are you pushing me for? What are you pushing me for? And he was like, fill this out, fill this out, fill this out. I'm like, open space, who's that? I don't even know who they are. And that was the job application for the job that I have. And the reason I got in there was because my husband like almost had a heart attack over me wanting to hold poisonous snakes or venomous snakes. So I'm like, I never did learn how because I ended up getting hired. But these kinds of things can happen in your life where you're like, oh, now I'm on to the next part of my journey, right? So I ended up over here at the Open Space Authority, and it's been really a fun experience. I've actually been there for 13 years now. Oh, that's the other thing. When you work in the park profession, it's really common and very much accepted to jump from agency to agency until you find the one that you really love. So it's very good for your career to spend your, like, the first year out of high school, like spend your summer working at state parks, helping them do campfires and helping people in the visitor center and stuff like that, helping them do virtual programs during COVID. And then the very next summer you choose a different agency. Like, I want to go to a city park at like Fremont City Parks. Go work for Fremont City Parks and see if they have programs they do there. And then after that, oh, I want to check out national parks. Find one that's close to you or not if you want to escape, and go do a season with them. And it's usually like 6 months, 6 to 9 months, but usually very heavily in the summertime is when they need people. And then during the school year for school programs, you guys could totally do a school program with your B program. Oh. And so it's very common. So by the time I got to open space, I had already been to city parks, county parks, state parks, the Youth Science Institute. And it was after I was at open space that I ended up actually going on and getting my master's degree and things like that, and getting additional training. This can happen too. So this is in our booth, our information booth that we take out. So you talk to the community a lot when you do this job. And then I was just dying because one time I went to a farmer's market with our booth and a stormtrooper showed up. I'm like, why? Let me take your picture. So I thought, that's pretty cool, man. You never know who's going to show up at your booth. And then this is me, like when I was really young, well, really young, like 10 years ago, and started. So I actually owned this snake that I was holding, and this one is a California king snake. And they're a really cool snake to have because they eat everybody else. So if you put them in the tank, which I never did this on purpose, right? Never did this period, but if you put them in the tank with another snake that's their size or smaller, they'll kill them and eat them. So if you don't like rattlesnakes and you're worried about rattlesnakes, you want king snakes on your property because they're immune to rattlesnake venom. And if a rattlesnake bites them, it just makes them mad. And then they squeeze them and then they swallow them like spaghetti. It's really crazy. And I got to do a lot of programs about like this is the bay checker spot butterfly costume. I got to do lots of programs like that. So I really like my job because it's really educational. I get to do a lot of really fun things, and including, so the person right in the front here, that's Danny, and she was working for me. So like, this could be your job. Doing meditation on top of Coyote Ridge with the Dhammakaya monks. So we had the monks come because they're very nature oriented. And they did a meditation for the public here. So we hiked people in from the top of Metcalf Motorcycle Park, and we put all these blankets down for them so that they could sit there and meditate. And this guy has the most soothing voice, and he's talking about how to meditate and teaching people how to meditate, and he's walking them through the experience, right? I opened my eyes and I looked over and I saw one of my volunteer docents. And he was doing this weird thing where he was like lifting his hands up above his head, like really as high as he could, but slowly. And I'm like, what is he doing? That's really weird. What is he doing? Is he stretching? I don't know. And then I heard it. And I hear this sound. And I'm like, all these people are sitting down, right? These monks, everywhere they go, animals show up. So I don't know if it's the tone of his voice, because he had a little speaker, he had a little speaker. So he's like, and then you relax your eyeball, relax your eye, relax your chin, like everything. And I was like, and so the animals come to him. So we had wild pigs that were living out there on top of the hill. And they started to walk up to the group because this guy was talking like that. And I'm like, oh! And the docent was standing up and he saw them first. So he goes like this. And then you knew the moment that the pig saw him because it goes "Wee!" like that. And then they took off this way and they actually ran. And the whole time these people were like meditating and calm. So they didn't know that it happened. And I'm like, that would have been quite the experience for them. But yeah, so can you see it? This is the other thing that's really cool that can happen. If I have children with ADHD, they'll be the first one to see this. So what happened was this guy I was working with took a picture of the bushes, and he didn't know why he did it. He just kind of felt like he should take a picture of the bushes. And then he got back to the office and he blew the picture up. See him right here? Bobcat! He didn't even see it when he was out there for real. He didn't see it there. He saw it later. So I'm like, but yeah, so there's lots of cool experiences and things that you can do in this profession. And then I love all the animals that we have because like we do have burrowing owls living on our properties. And so trying to figure out how to manage for them. And so there's a whole part of the agency that just does wildlife management type stuff. And then we have a whole bunch of people that deal with the plants, like are the plants weeds? Are they okay? What kind of techniques do we use for these plants to get the ones that we want? And so within 5 years of getting a property, we get rid of all the weeds and we get rid of all of the plants that are not supposed to be there. And then it's just beautiful. So that's kind of like really cool. And then we get to partner with people like Rick from the Wildlife Education Center down in Morgan Hill. And he has a peregrine falcon here. And that one is actually like, it got hit by a car, so its wing is broken. And so it can't be wild because it wouldn't be able to survive. So he gets to bring that bird out to like programs that we do together. And then the other program you guys can do if you want is called Bay Area Wilderness Training. And so they have a sliding scale. So if you want to learn how to go backpacking so that you can take your group or community groups to locations that you think will be really great for your education, like say you find a location where there's really great bees and special flowers that they eat. So like even the honey would be amazing and stuff like that. You could learn how to take groups backpacking by going with the Bay Area Wilderness Training people. And they teach you everything, they provide everything. And then once you get certified by them, it's like a 4-day backpacking trip. You can use all their stuff for the rest of your life. So you could have a group of 12 people and they'll give you everything except the underwear. So you have to buy your own food and the underwear, but everything else to go backpacking, you can actually do that. And then I just wanted to show you, like, we have so many cool different opportunities that we do. We have artists that come and they do stuff like this where they teach people how to do artwork, art in the park type stuff. And this is Doug Greer, and he actually painted this eagle himself. So he's one of our docents too. So I think there's some of the wildlife and stuff like that. So I think, unless do you guys have any more questions? Did I cover what I was supposed to cover? Or too much excitement? So this is the kind of stuff, I mean, you can get paid to hike. You can get paid to take people up for hikes in the park and to see these kinds of things. And then the most important thing for me is helping people understand where they fit into nature. That nature, we are part of nature, we're not separate from nature. We're all part of the same community, and the community and our ethics includes things that are plants and animals and the environment. So if you realize that we're part of the same team, you might be more likely to protect it and to feel more love and compassion, for the natural environment, and see how the natural environment can help you too. Especially now with all these fires, because we really need the plants more than ever to like soak up the pollution, like the polluted air, and give us oxygen. So I think there's going to be a lot of planting parties once the fires are out for people to like, try to restore. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, if you go to Sierra Vista, which is the closest park to you guys, this is the view during the sunsets.
So I have another question now.
Sure.
So that is, how is geoengineering used in park management?
Geoengineering?
Yeah.
That's a new phrase for me. I'm like, oh, I have to learn about this. So can you describe it to me a little bit? Like, what do you mean by geoengineering? Like,
Geoengineering is like, you know how you talked about nitrogen fixation earlier? So nitrogen is like obviously a gas. So when you fix that, like with other things, like once I tried doing this project where I used sugar crystals
cool.
for like nitrogen fixation. So I found there's this thing called triboluminescence, which is where you split like a piece of sugar crystals into 3 nitrogen atoms. So you can actually artificially seed nitrogen into the air.
What? That's
So
cool, I think. Is
so
there a
art
way to go backwards?
So this thing called artificial seeding is technically geoengineering.
Oh, interesting. Well, we do have our natural resources team right now is working on ways to make the land more effective, or that's not the right word. Like they're trying to figure out, part of what we do is make the land as healthy as we can, and so that it'll be as productive as it can be in a natural way. And then part of what we're doing is trying to make it so healthy that it'll suck up a lot of the pollution and try to absorb carbon, like it becomes a carbon sink, and will actually absorb some of these greenhouse gases. And if we can do that, then we can offset the damage from global climate change. So if we can do that, that's what we're trying to learn how to do right now. So see, that's what I mean by like, we need like exceptional minds like yours to come out with these ideas and do research like on our properties and figure out how we can do stuff like that. Because we were totally open to that. Like people coming and doing research projects and figuring things out, like how we can make things work better. So yeah, I think you should think of some ideas that you think that we should look into, and think about writing a letter to our board of directors. And because they'll actually put that in their board packet and they'll like read it and go, oh, you know, Jovina has like this really cool idea. And then they'll ask the staff, like, what do you think about that? And then the staff will say, that's a really good idea. We should try it. So you can do that. You can, and not just open space, you can write to the boards of all kinds of park agencies with ideas that you have and ask them, have you thought about doing this, you know, to deal with this particular issue? Because like I said, a lot of times they haven't thought of it.
I just have a comment, which is just sort of my opinion, but if the plants like absorb all the carbon and like the pollution, won't the plants be polluted?
They're kind of really interesting in how they handle it. Like, I wouldn't know if I'd want to eat them. I might be worried about eating them, but I'm probably not going to eat an oak tree. It would be a good experiment to find out if an oak tree absorbs a certain amount of carbon and other like greenhouse gases, at what point does it become harmful to that tree, like if it's overwhelmed? And then also to like actually do an experiment where you test how much of that ends up in the acorns that wildlife would eat. That would be fascinating to know.
You just gave me a science fair project idea.
Come do that with us.
I might.
Neat. Right on.
Yeah, sorry. I was wondering if you have to leave anytime soon, or can you stay for more questions?
Oh, I can stay. Yeah, it's all good.
Hey, glad to hear. Thank you.
Do you guys have any other ideas or questions that you want? Or is there stuff like, because I get excited and I sometimes forget like what I'm supposed to be talking about. So I have some little notes here, but so the career path, it was like, one of the things that I did was when I first started out, I went to college, and I had like gone to like a couple, actually 3 different junior colleges. So I had 3 junior college degrees, and then I went right into the parks. And there was a job that I wanted to get. So when I got full time as a park ranger, they take you from the park you're in and they put you in a different one. And they do that on purpose because you're changing your status. And they want the people in the new park to like accept you as a higher rank than like a part-time park ranger or a beginner like park aide. So I had a choice that I could have gone to Almaden Lake, which is like a really cool park where they have swimming and all this kind of stuff. It's like a really cool lake. Or I could go to Kelly Park, which is where Happy Hollow Park and Zoo is, and the Japanese Friendship Garden, but it was kind of like more urban. And I had spent all of my earlier years in Alum Rock Park, which was very rural and had a lot of wildlife. And so I didn't actually want to go to Kelly Park in the beginning. I wanted to go to Almaden Lake. And part of what happened was afterwards, they ended up hiring this other person that had very little park experience, but she got to go to Almaden Lake. And I asked the boss, I said, I'm not one to complain, but I said, so how come I didn't get to go to Almaden Lake? You know, because I've been with the agency for, 3 years and stuff like that. And he said, well, he said, to be honest, it's because she has a master's degree. And I'm like, what? So that was really good inspiration for me to go get a higher degree, like a higher degree in education, because if somebody could come in with no park experience and get the choice park because of her educational background, then I was holding myself back by thinking that I was okay with my park management. I had park management, natural resources management, and then I had a extra one because I took so many classes. I end up with a liberal arts degree also. So I was like, but it wasn't a bachelor's and it wasn't a master's degree. And so because she had a master's, she got to go to that park. But it ended up being a really good thing for me to be at Kelly Park because there was so much diversity there. And I got to go for walks in the zoo anytime I wanted. And I learned all the cool behind the scenes stories, like about their jaguar that they had back then, not the one they have now, but the one they had back then. She was really mean. And they kept trying to breed her so that they could increase the jaguar population, because they're trying to save them as a species. And so the first 2 times that 2 different zoos loaned us a male jaguar, they don't know if she's going to like him or not, right? So they put the male jaguar in the zoo pen, like, in the enclosure with this female, and they're watching and it seems to be okay. So they go home. And they came back and he was gone. So she was so mean, she ate him. They found pieces. And it happened twice. I'm like, oh, if I heard it happen once, I wouldn't loan my male jaguar to you. So like, she ate 2 male jaguars over the span of 5 years. And so they actually, the 3rd time they tried to get one, they're like, Everyone was like, no way. But she ended up dying of like old age, and she never did reproduce. So that was sad because they're trying to like increase the population so they could ideally release them back into the wild at some point, like the babies and stuff. But the next one that they brought in had a really nervous stomach. I'm like, does she like throw up or something? What do you mean? And they said, no, she gets really nervous. I'm like, oh, wow, I never met a nervous jaguar before. So like that kind of stuff can happen. And then I could go in the Japanese Friendship Garden anytime I wanted, and I would walk through and tell people all about the cultural history of it and the mythologies and the stories about all the guardian stones and stuff like that. And then the other end of the park was actually the San Jose Historical Museum. So I could go through there. I didn't go into those buildings, but I could walk around in the complex, go get ice cream and stuff like that. That was pretty fun.
So does Open Space Authority offer any scholarships or internships?
We do. So we do have, so there's a couple things. One thing that I would like you to consider is I got to find out if they're going to let people do stuff from outside the jurisdiction, because technically I think you're outside the jurisdiction, but as long as you serve people within the jurisdiction, your group could actually get a grant from the Open Space Authority to provide education about bees in Santa Clara County. So the difference is you could still do it from home. You could still do it from your school, but you would be reaching out to schools in Santa Clara County and talking to those teachers and saying, we have this great program. It's all about stuff that happens, you know, up in our area, but also this applies to your own area too. And so if you want to learn all about pollinators and bees, we have this program, and because of the Open Space Authority, the public doesn't have to pay for it. But what they do is we would pay for your time. So you have to write the whole grant proposal up and make a budget and all this kind of stuff. But you say, okay, I want to pay somebody $20 an hour to do these programs. And we're going to need a camera, and we're going to need a blah, 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 like whatever we need in order to, like, you know, papers or thumb drives to send the teacher, or however you want to do it. You have to figure out what that would cost. And so our grant program just closed, but there'll be another one like next year. So that's something to think about, because you can get anywhere from, I think the bottom scale is like $20,000, and it goes up to like 50 or 60,000. I have to check. It's on our website. But that's a little one. If you're going to build something in Santa Clara County, you can get more. You can get like $200,000-$300,000 from the Open Space Authority. But for education, you could have a job. That could be your job, like to get paid through that grant to do a certain number of programs for open space. And then you tell the teachers, like, this normally costs $150, but open space is paying for it, so it's free. And then they go, oh, this is so wonderful. And then even if your grant, when your grant runs out, you could have people pay you to do school programs for them.
So does that include Zoom meetings?
Yes. So you could create a Zoom. I would recommend doing a webinar, because a lot of people are worried about Zoom bombing, and there's different rules for children, like little kids. So what they do is they'll probably just be a name on a black screen. So it's kind of weird when you're doing it, because you're like, is anybody out there? You don't have the facial stuff to like go off of, but you would call up the teacher, and the teacher would give the link to all of the kids. So they're all at home, but they would log in to experience your program. So everybody that's doing stuff with us right now that's submitted for money, they're all going to have to be virtual. Like for their educational programs, they're all going to have to be virtual, or they're going to have to take groups of like 6 people. Better to do Zoom, I think, because you can get a lot more people that way. So make sure when you do your presentations that you're keeping track of how many people see it. And I would consider, I know I'm like old and I still do Facebook, but if you do Facebook Live and you do a presentation where you're out in the field and you're like showing people bees and you're showing them flowers, the hard part is that it's live. You don't get a do-over. It's recorded. But the good part is that all these people will start to log in to like watch you and see these programs and have their kids learn from you. And then what happens is when it goes on your Facebook page for your group, you can actually see how many people watched it after the program. So each of our programs that we do has an average of 2,000 to 4, sometimes 6,000 views by the end of the month. I used to get excited over having 50 people come to a program. Now I have like 4,000 to 6,000 people watching the same program.
So do you have like an application for like those scholarships?
So it's actually on our webpage. So if you, in fact, might be able to.
Actually, do you mind putting it in the chat? Because
Wait, actually, we are running a bit over time, so I'm thinking, yeah, for those who wants to leave, they can leave, and then for those who wants to stay and ask more questions and just talk, yeah, feel free to just keep staying and talking, but yeah. Yeah, thank you, Terry, for coming.
And thank you, Ms. Roggaway, for speaking with us today and just like giving us such an informative presentation. And also thank you for everyone who joined today. And we hope that you guys will come tomorrow too for day 3 of our webinar. And I did link a member application if you want to join. So for HNB and beyond.
Yay! I put my email down there, so if you want to email me at open space, you can do that, and I'll respond. And yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I wasn't watching the chat. I'm sorry I wasn't watching the chat because I was sharing. I couldn't see it.
Actually, before all of you leave, is it okay if we're gonna like take a gallery picture with all the participants?
Oh, cool.
So I'll like count down and we can take a picture. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you guys.
Neat. Cool.
See you later.
Right on.
Thank you for coming.
You too.
Fun.
And thank you, Miss Terry, for the presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You're most welcome.
And for answering my question.
For sure, I love talking to you.
The hardest part when you're doing educational programs is when